They start out in the middle of nowhere, some lonely desert road, a dark forest, places where it's easy to just dismiss what you saw. But this story, this isn't one of those. So what happens when an unidentified object doesn't crash in some empty patch of land like Roswell, miles and miles from anyone? What if it comes hurtling down right in the middle of a bustling city, a city with over 100,000 people in the middle of the day? And here's the real kicker. What if the occupants survived and they were now terrified, injured, and loose on the streets? Well, in January of 1996, the town of Varginha, Brazil became the unwilling stage for exactly that, a real-life science fiction horror story. It all kicked off with a warning from the sky and an encounter that would shatter reality for an entire town. So the day starts with a pretty high-level alert. NORAD, that's the North American Air Defense Command, they get on the horn with the Brazilian Air Force. They tracked an unidentified object, plunging into Brazilian airspace. But before long, it's not just on a radar screen. Farmers look up and see this thing. They said it looked like a submarine, about the size of a small bus, sputtering white smoke and clearly in trouble. And then a motorist, a guy named Carlos de Souza, doesn't just see it, he follows it. He actually watches it go down, and almost instantly the military is there. They swarm the area like they'd been waiting for it. Now, before Carlos gets chased off, he gets close enough to the wreckage to notice two things, and this is where it gets really weird. First, the smell, an overpowering stench of ammonia and sulfur, so strong it made his eyes water. And second, the debris itself. He managed to grab a piece of what looked like aluminum foil, but it felt like nothing in his hand, almost weightless. He crumpled it up into a ball, and when he opened his hand, it just unfolded itself, perfectly smooth again. No creases, no damage. Right away, he knew this was not from any plane he'd ever seen. As if a military lockdown wasn't enough to scare him, Carlos was later visited by two men in dark suits. You've heard the stories, right? Well, for him, it became real. And their message was simple and absolutely chilling. They told him to forget everything he saw. They knew where he lived, they knew his family, and he was to never speak of this again. And for 26 years, he kept his mouth shut. But the thing is, the story was already out there, because whatever was in that craft was no longer at the crash site. So the focus shifts. It's no longer about a crashed object. It's about something or someone alive. And the official response? Well, it wasn't a rescue mission. It was a full-blown manhunt. And what's really striking here is how consistent the descriptions were from different people who had no connection to each other. The most famous sighting involved three young women who were taking a shortcut through a vacant lot, and they came face to face with it, a creature huddled against a wall. It was small, maybe 4 or 5 feet tall, with this dark, oily-looking brown skin. But what seared into their memory were the eyes, huge, red, and, according to them, filled with pain and fear. They felt like it needed help, but their own terror just took over. I mean, think about it. The reaction wasn't, wow, an alien. It was pure primal terror. They ran home, bursting through the door, screaming to their mother that they had just seen a demon. When their mother went back to the spot, the creature was gone, but two things were left behind. That same strange, heavy smell of ammonia and a single, very unusual footprint in the mud with 3 distinct toes. At this point, the authorities are in full swing. The fire department gets a strange call. Go search for a wild animal. But this was no ordinary animal. After 2-hour search through a wooded area, they managed to trap one of the beings in a net. And then, witnesses see the military roll up and take over. They watch as soldiers load 2 large black bags onto a truck. And this is the part that gives you chills. Witnesses swear one of those bags was squirming, fighting, while the other one was completely still. And here, the story takes a much darker, much more tragic turn. Because for one of the men involved in his capture, this encounter was about to become a fatal one. A 23-year-old military police officer named Marco Cherez was one of the first responders on the scene. According to the story, he was the one who actually grabbed one of the creatures with his bare hands to get it under control. Within hours, he started feeling sick. He told his family he had this weird greasy feeling on his skin that wouldn't wash off, and that same ammonia smell, it just wouldn't go away. His health went downhill fast. Officer Cherez ended up in intensive care, and the doctors were totally stumped. His body was shutting down from a massive infection, but they couldn't figure out why. He died just a few weeks later. The family was denied an autopsy, and the military ordered a closed-casket funeral for so-called public health reasons. But his family did get a copy of his blood test, and it contained an absolutely shocking discovery. 8% of the toxic substances in his blood were completely unknown to science. From there, the cover-up just went into overdrive. The local hospital locked down by the military. An X-ray tech was woken up in the middle of the night, forced to scan a body bag, and then had the film immediately confiscated. Hospital staff were told that if they ever spoke about what they saw, they'd be charged with treason. And those men in black? They started showing up at witnesses' homes offering them massive bribes to just be quiet. The whole story seems to end with a U.S. Air Force C-17 making an unscheduled stop, allegedly to load up the beings and the wreckage and fly them right out of Brazil. Okay, so what we have here is an almost airtight story. Multiple eyewitnesses, an official response, physical evidence, and even a tragic death that seems to prove contact. It's a perfect case. But when a story is this perfect, you have to start looking for the cracks. A tale this incredible, with so many witnesses and so many moving parts, absolutely demands scrutiny. So now we're going to hit the brakes, we're going to pivot, and we are going to look at the official explanations that try to pull this entire incredible story right back down to earth. So let's start with the most iconic part of the story, the creature sighting. The official explanation suggests this was all a tragic, heartbreaking misunderstanding. Apparently, there was a well-known local man with severe mental and physical disabilities who went by the nickname Mundinho. He was known to crouch in public places, and the theory goes that after a heavy rainstorm, he was likely covered in mud, creating a strange and frankly frightening appearance for the young women who saw him. Now, for their part, the women have always insisted they knew Mundinho and this was absolutely not him. But it's worth noting, their very first reaction was that they had seen a demon, not an alien. Okay, what about the death of Officer Cherez? That seems like a smoking gun, right? Well, the official military investigation tells a very different story. It states that he had a pre-existing cyst under his arm that became severely infected, leading to sepsis, which is what ultimately killed him. And here's the biggest blow to the story. The military released a 1,000-page report on the incident, and in it, official records show that on the night of the alleged creature capture, Officer Marco Cherez wasn't even on duty. And you start to see a pattern. Every single strange event has an official and pretty mundane explanation. That massive military presence all over town? Oh, that was just a coincidence. It was a routine training exercise, and some military vehicles were just being moved to a nearby base for scheduled maintenance. The hospital lockdown? That was standard procedure. They were sterilizing a wing to install new cardiac equipment. And that mysterious body bag that was x-rayed in the middle of the night? That was an exhumed human body, part of a completely separate and unrelated police investigation. So, where does that leave us? On one side, you've got a series of rational, if maybe a little too convenient explanations. And on the other, you have a town full of people who swear on their lives that what they saw that day changed them forever. And this really is the core of the entire Varginha mystery. There isn't a single shred of hard physical evidence, not one piece of that strange metal, no biological samples, no clear photographs, nothing. All we have are the stories. But you have to admit, they are powerful stories. They're told with real, raw emotion and incredible consistency for decades by dozens of people, from farmers to doctors to military personnel, who really had nothing to gain from this, and in many cases, a lot to lose. But there is one person who could probably clear all of this up: Officer Eric Lopez. He was Marcos Cherez's partner. He was driving the police car that night. He was there. He helped capture and transport the being. He saw everything from start to finish. And yet, for over 25 years, he has maintained a complete and total wall of silence. He reportedly gets angry and threatens anyone who even tries to ask him about it. And that's the final, nagging question, isn't it? Why? Is he protecting a world-changing secret? Or is he just a guy who's sick and tired of being bothered about a story that got out of hand? So what really happened in Varginha? Was it the site of arguably the most significant event in human history, followed by one of the most brilliant and effective cover-ups ever pulled off? Or was it just a perfect storm of misidentification, coincidence, and rumor that spiraled into a case of mass hysteria? The official reports say one thing, but the people who were there tell a story that, if it's true, changes absolutely everything. You decide what's real. Thank you for exploring another anomaly with us here at the Synthetic Paradox. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, a like, subscribe, and a share is the best way to support our investigations. I'll see you on the next one.